Okay, welcome to the Castle Morpeth Local Planning Committee. For those of you who are watching on YouTube through Northumberland TV, just to advise, we are working in a COVID-safe environment. And to anyone in the room, if you do need to get up at any point, whether to go to the facilities or to leave the room after a particular planning application's been heard, etc., could you please ensure you do put your face mask back on when you leave the table, please? Thank you very much. Okay, can we have apologies for absence, please?
I've received apologies from Councillor Jones.
Chair, Peter Jackson.
Do we have any others? Okay, and the minutes of the previous Castle Morpeth Local Area Council held on the 14th of June as circulated. Can we confirm this as a true record, please? Thank you. Do we have any disclosure of members' interests? I don't see anyone indicating, that's fine. And then we'll move on to the determination of planning applications. Basically, what will happen is for each application, it will be introduced, and I will check to make sure members have seen the site videos that have been circulated in advance of this meeting. And then we will be informed if there are any updates or changes to the recommendations that are actually in the report, and then the planning officer will present that report. We will then move on to public speaking, and the objectors have up to 5 minutes, and that would be shared if there was more than one objector. Then the local member or parish councillor, they would have 5 minutes, and then the applicant supporter, again, 5 minutes between. We would then go to members' questions to the planning officers. Once we've exhausted those questions, we will then move on to the debate, which will follow a proposal and seconder for either for the application to be approved or for it to not be approved, or for site visits, etc. At that point, we will then, once the debate's finished, we will move to the vote, and then that will be the end of that particular planning application once the vote's been counted. Thank you. And with that, if we can move on to the first application, 20/01242/FUL, which is a conversion of existing shop use of Class E (A) to form residential dwelling, including external alterations to existing attached dwelling, and amended plans received on the 26th of April 2021, Belmont East Road in Longhorsley. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just as an update to members before the presentation, one further objection was received against the application from a member of the public, raising concerns regarding the loss of the retail unit and the use of UPVC fenestration within the building. As set out within the officer report, the applicant intends to replace the UPVC fenestration within the building to timber sliding sash windows, in keeping with the aesthetic of the conservation area. So just moving on to the presentation. Planning permission is sought for the conversion of an existing shop to residential use, including external alterations to the existing building. The proposal would form one residential dwelling within the application property recognised as Belmont. The application site is located within a prominent position within the settlement of Longhorsley, adjacent to the A697 public highway. This slide also shows the application site's position within Longhorsley Conservation Area, as well as the public right-of-way, which is located to the western and southern boundaries of the site. This slide shows the proposed site layout with access and parking provision located to the rear of the site. External changes to the building are proposed, consisting of the installation of a pitched roof over the rear offshoot, the introduction of additional openings and installation of timber fenestration replacing existing UPVC windows. These site photographs show the site frontage and the right-of-way that bounds the application site. As outlined within the officer report, village green status also exists within this area, although this is out with the curtilage of the existing building. The map on screen shows the village green layout within with the application site marked in red. These photographs show the rear of the application site. The existing track, which would be used for access to the rear of the building, is also visible upon these images. The application is recommended for approval subject to conditions outlined within the officer report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, can I just double check that you all did receive the site video visit and that you have actually watched it? Yep, lovely, thank you. So now we move on to the public speaking, and we have Alan Etchells, who will be speaking on behalf of the objectors for this application. Alan, if you'd like to start on your own time, the time will start as soon as you start speaking.
Okay. I'm Alan Etchells. I edit the community newsletter for Long Horsley, and I was a member of the working group that developed the Long Horsley neighbourhood plan, which went through full scrutiny before being confirmed as valid by NCC and being adopted in October 2018. I'm here to object to the change of use from commercial to residential, and I would be objecting even if we didn't have a neighbourhood plan, but we do, and its policies need to be followed. There's been a commercial premises in this building since it was built in 1875 by the Bell family of Biro fame. Most recently, it was a successful hairdressers for 9 years and was providing a useful community service, including selling calendars for the newsletter and acting as a community collection point for information leaflets. More importantly, it provided employment for 3 people. As well as renting the commercial premises, the hairdresser also rented the residential part of the building. She left in January 2020, not because there was any financial hardship, but only because in September 2019, she had been given notice to quit. She was told that they were selling the property and she had to be out by September 2020. After notice had been served, the 2 people working with the tenant left as soon as they found alternative employment. At that point, the tenant did text the owners saying she would have difficulty covering the rent with income generated by 1 rather than 3 people. That text has been quoted out of context to give the inaccurate impression that the business was in financial hardship. I have a signed statement affirming these facts. Unfortunately, that misrepresentation has been accepted as fact and has resulted in a material inaccuracy in the case officer's reports. Incidentally, that report wasn't posted on public access, so we were only able to see it when it was attached to the agenda for this meeting. I accept that the owner will have to upgrade the energy performance of the commercial property, but I cannot accept that that will cost more than £67,000. The applicant is asking this committee to believe that it will cost £1,700 per square metre just to upgrade the energy performance of the 40 square metres that was until recently a fully functioning, successful business. Policy LNP8 of our neighbourhood plan says that the applicant has to demonstrate that the existing commercial use is no longer economically viable, and, I repeat, and it has been marketed for at least 6 months without an appropriate offer being received. I'm sure that the commercial use is economically viable, but even if I haven't convinced you of that, you must accept that it hasn't been marketed for at least 6 months, because it hasn't been, and the applicant hasn't offered any evidence that it has been. The application must comply with all elements of our neighbourhood plan. If you ignore our neighbourhood plan, what message does that send about the importance and validity of Northumberland's neighbourhood plans. Every member of every neighbourhood planning team will know that they've wasted their time. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move on to the elected member for the division of parish and town councillors, and we have Penny Ford, the Vice Chair of Long Horsley Parish Council. Thank you.
The Parish Council raises the continued problem of access for 3 cars to this property. We are disappointed that NCC Planning have proposed a scheme for approval when the 3 cars for which there is parking space would have to access the site over a public footpath which is on Village Green. Neither the applicant nor NCC Planning have engaged in any dialogue with the Parish Council concerning this aspect of the application. The footpath concerned is registered public right-of-way 411/25 and is registered Village Green, reference VG18. The footpath over which proposed access will be made connects the East Road and the A697 at the location of the light-controlled pedestrian crossing. The 697 is an extremely busy road with many very large lorries and a great increase in holiday traffic, and this is set to get worse when the A1 works commence. The 697 bisects the village with 3 estates on the east side and the shop, the village hall, the post office, the school, the church, the football pitch and the village nature trail on the west side. Access to the community ward is also via the west side footpath. NCC itself decided that the only safe place for a pedestrian crossing over the 697 was at the southern end of this footpath, which means that this is the recommended and safest route for those living on the East Road, Reeves Gate and the Wilding Place estates for them to access the village amenities. Reeves Gate has a mainly older population and Wilding Place a mix of young families and older people for whom safe access is essential. Construction of the crossing was championed and part funded by our county councillor. The track is a public footpath over Village Green. Car access is certainly not an appropriate use, and a car and a pedestrian cannot pass together. Further, the footpath has only a soil surface. It is misleading for anyone to suggest this could be an access route for up to 3 cars to a domestic property. The existing soil surface has never been intended for regular traffic use. This was demonstrated when much damage was caused when the area at the north end of the application property was cleared in the early stage of the building works and the surface never repaired. The Parish Council is also very disappointed that the perfectly viable option for making a vehicle entrance to the north side of the site, directly onto the East Road, has apparently never been explored. This would have excellent visibility displays and would be safe, but would involve the applicant in the purchase of a few square metres of open land. Secondly, the Parish Council continues to strongly object to the change of use. We believe that aside from reducing the future opportunity of commercial use, which is against the principle of ensuring sustainability of rural village communities, approving the application would contravene Policy 8 of the Long Horsley Neighbourhood Plan. The officer report to committee sadly ignores part of this policy, which we believe sets an unacceptable precedent and undermines its validity. The officer report to this committee contains inaccurate information, has conclusions based on inaccurate information, and as such cannot be considered as valid. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final public speaker for this application, the supporter, Leslie Singleton.
Hello, I'm Leslie Singleton. I'm the applicant. I don't know anything about anything that happened before January in 2019. 2020, as I wasn't involved in this. However, we don't believe that the shop is viable, and we couldn't put it out to rent or tender because it comes below the energy efficiency rate of E. So it was just impossible to be able to advertise it. We would have done that because it's been more than 6 months now, so if someone had wanted it, that would have been fair enough, but we still don't believe that there's a viable property there. As for the access, it's the only access to do any parking whatsoever in that area. As said, it's near to a busy road, there's a pub car park, and there are the 2 roads which are public rights of way to the front and to the side of the building. The only reasonable access is to the rear, because the building is on a bit of a hill, let's say. It's raised ground, so the access for everyone isn't ideal at the front. But at the back it is, because the ground is level with the house, so it can be used for access into the house. The shop will remain as it is, with the front access, the shop front, and access to the house. So it could be turned back into a shop at some point in the future, but we don't believe it's necessary at the minute, or we don't believe it's required at the minute. Apart from that, I don't know anything about the north entrance, because there isn't an access from any of the properties to the north road, the east road I believe it's called. So that one's a mystery to me. I did get in touch with the parish council early on when there was complaints about some damage to the village green, which weren't by me, because that was before my time. I came into this project late. And we did ask if we could have a meeting with the parish council to discuss the public right-of-way and the way forward. I never received an answer to it. And really, all I can tell you from that is I'm more than happy to accept any conditions which would be applied to this. And I've got 40 years in construction, in heritage projects, not just in the UK, but Europe too. And I know exactly what's required, and I would be able to do this job to the standard expected. I'm more than happy to answer any questions further. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much to all of our public speakers. At this point, we will then move on to questions from members. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm actually the County Councillor for the ward in which this application is made. I want to first of all ask a question, if I may, on paragraph 7.5 and 7.6 as well. Long Horsley is a village that has grown fairly significantly over recent years and is likely to increase in size more as more housing gets built. And I think that to make a statement that says that commercial use is unlikely to be viable is simply difficult for me to accept. So I'd like to have some clarification about that. I'd like to have some clarification about what effect COVID might have had on this and the problems that has caused commercial premises. And then finally, I'd like just to have some clarification around the 6 months advertising and whether that has actually happened.
Thank you. Ryan, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, no problem. So, yeah, in part sort of 7.5 of the officer report, it's outlined that the premises have been vacant since January sort of 2020. And that a statement was also provided from the previous owner of the property, which stated that the previous use of the premises as a retail store prior to a hairdresser's what wasn't viable within sort of Long Horsley village. In terms of sort of the 6 months reference, there is a policy within sort of the Long Horsley neighbourhood plan, which we detail within part 7.2 of the officer report, which states that a site should be marketed for freehold or leasehold purposes for the current use at a reasonable commercial price for a period of at least 6 months without an appropriate offer being received. Just sort of repeating what sort of the public speaker said, that at this current stage the property isn't at a lettable standard, and that the sort of costs involved to actually upgrade the building to a lettable standard would be so significant that any commercial use within that sort of premises, just in terms of a tenant, wouldn't be viable in sort of our view. In terms of, well, sort of taking this into consideration and the planning balance, ourselves as a local planning authority therefore consider that the information provided demonstrates that it sort of overrides sort of the request for the 6 month sort of marketable rate. I don't know if Rob has anything further to add on that matter.
Yeah, it is a standard requirement, and you may have come across it more regularly when we're talking about closing public houses, that an active approach must have been taken to keep the business running viably, or to actively market it for actively market it for sale. This is an unusual case, and in part this is why this is a useful planning committee decision, because there's almost a catch-22 situation here, is that because of the recent upgrades in the requirements of energy efficiency standards, this building can't be marketed until it's upgraded, and the applicant is asserting that it is not viable to expend at the level required to make it in such a state that it can be marketed. Members of the committee are entirely able to make the decision to whether or not a further period of attempt is required on this front. However, just marketing in itself and then saying, but we can't let it, would be an exercise in almost like a paper exercise at this stage. However, it is a general principle that changing use in this circumstance should almost be a matter of last recourse. And what the report has attempted to do is to set out a proportionate testing of that. Okay.
Could I just come back on that, please?
Yes, certainly, Councillor Sanderson.
You see, I've got a concern here that we have heard from a resident who's spoken today that conflicts with this report. And that makes any decision about a change of use or any application, but in this one in particular, very difficult. And I just needed to have clarification that there is a difference of opinion on that. And having established there is a difference of opinion, I suppose my other question, if I may, is have the planning department actually seen and studied closely this estimate of £67,000?
Chair, I'll come in here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a point well made, Councillor Sanderson. We receive lots of arguments over viability for large schemes, predominantly large housing schemes, and on that we go to the step of taking third-party sort of triangulation of that, as an independent advisor to look at that. However, for most minor ones, we will look at that internally and decide whether or not it is a reasonable position. Can I suggest to the Chair that if members were minded to refuse this application, maybe a meeting of halfways could be to defer the decision until a third party was brought in to carry out a triangulation of the assertions made in the viability assessment. Okay. So we don't do that normally on applications of this scale, Councillor Sanderson, but given its local importance, I can sense that members may wish. And that would enable, I would suggest, a more robust decision either to approve or refuse if members were undecided as to which way to go.
So finally, if I may, Chair, can I just come back and say I think that's an eminently sensible way forward. It is a small application, but for a village like Long Horsley, it's actually a very big decision, this. I think Long Horsley is going to continue to flourish. It's a fine village, it's a fine community. And I think doing anything that detracts from potential commercial opportunities that would benefit the residents has got to be looked at very, very carefully. And until such time as certainly I'm persuaded that all the arguments are sound and well-rounded, I would wish to ask committee to certainly either defer this or seek a refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Bourne?
Thank you, Chair. My question's on a slightly different, well, on a completely different issue. It's the access across the village green was mentioned by the parish council. Now, to my mind, the right of way is a legal issue regarding whether or not this property has a right of way. It's not really a planning issue. If Bob, maybe you can sort of clarify that point.
It is and it isn't, Councillor Bourne. What I could say is that if there was no suitable access, then that would be a planning matter. However, just to be clear, while there'll be a range of views on this, from a legislative perspective, that if you have a public right-of-way, there is no restriction over vehicles using that as well. So that's a starting point. The only time this becomes difficult is if that public right-of-way is in private ownership and the owner exercises the right not to allow vehicles to use it. However, that in itself wouldn't preclude us from granting planning permission. However, so in this case, we are saying that technically, as an access point, it is acceptable, and legislation permits, even though it does sound somewhat a contradiction in terms that what we call a footpath or public right of way can be used for vehicular access at locations like this. Okay.
So just to clarify, because there's obviously a difference between a footpath and a bridle way or a vehicle access.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah. So do we know what exists actually on the site? Is it footpath or is it like a more general?
I can just ask Ryan to come in to clarify, but it sounds like it is an unrestricted bridle way, is it?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And we've consulted with sort of our public right-of-way team on this application. They've raised sort of no objections subject to a condition, which is condition 9, which states that sort of no impact should be taken to disturb the path surface without the prior consent of sort of the highway authority on those grounds.
Thank you. Councillor Dickinson.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of things on this then. So in terms of the right of way, which has been referenced earlier, paragraph 7.30 refers to an arrangement that already occurs, and 7.31 refers to the applicant being responsible for any cause or damage to the path in the future, and a condition could be attached regarding this. So the question is, if that would be the condition and that they would be responsible, who's responsible now? And in terms of the arrangement that's being battered back and forward between the head of planning and Councillor Sanderson, on an item like this, a third party intervention stroke deferral for a third party advice, what kind of cost would that be?
So, yeah, I'm sort of happy to sort of answer that first question on sort of the right of way. So yeah, there's a public right of way which is sort of visible just to sort of the western boundary of the application site, and that runs up to sort of from South Road up to sort of East Road. Public right of way have stated, and like sort of Rob clarified before, that any right of way can be used by sort of vehicles, but in terms of this one, they are aware of previous damages that have been undertaken to this right of way in the past, obviously sort of not as part of this planning application, and that's why they've requested that condition that sort of no action should be taken to disturb the path surface, and any developer who is sort of absolutely developing the site would have to comply with that condition. So if there was sort of any impact upon that right of way, we've got that condition there where the public right of way team can go back to the developer on those grounds. So it would be anyone who's caused that damage. On the second question, I don't know whether Rob had.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah. While I'm never keen to be spending more money out of my budgets, this is obviously a locally important issue, and one of the advantages, though, of handling a very, very large number of applications, as this authority does, which is, 5,700 per annum at the moment, that does allow for some degree of statistical smoothing over costs. Of course, our first port of call will be to use internal resources for this in terms of getting advice from our building control and housing departments that the works proposed were reasonable in themselves, and then we would go out just on the question of the costing of those. So I think we can manage the costs down on this fairly significantly.
So just to come back on my point then, Chair, so Ryan's just confirmed that currently nobody's responsible. In future, the applicant would be responsible. And the third point, which will set a precedence for all these types of applications, is we're not sure on the cost.
I can't be sure on the cost until I get a quote on it. We'll use the lowest of 3 quotes, and we can manage this by using internal resources to do what I'd say is like the first 2/3 of the work, but the actual validation of the costs I'd want to be done externally and independently. We regularly use viability consultants on all manner of applications. Given the importance of this and its importance to the neighbourhood plan, I do think there's an argument. This issue probably won't crop up that much in terms of the scale of things, whereas unlike almost all housing schemes of more than 10 units have to have a viability assessment with it. I don't think we'll be opening the floodgates, particularly on this one. And actually, there is an argument that once we've been through this one and we've set the evidential bar requirements, that we can ask for a third-party triangulation to be funded as part of the application by the applicant as well. And so this is another reason why it's good to get a committee backing for the decision we are making here. Okay.
Councillor Towns.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of issues. Going back to the right of way, am I right in thinking that the public right of way is also on village green, land that is registered village green? And this is starting to get to be a bit of a legal nightmare here, I think, because as I recall, driving on a village green is illegal under some Victorian legislation, Commons Act 18-something or other, 1876. It can be made lawful if the owner of the village green permits it. But in this case, I assume the owner of the village green is the parish council, and given their objections, I doubt they would permit it. So it sounds to me like there might not be viable access after all.
Chair, could I come here? Okay. And this is a common issue which plays out is access is technically achievable, okay? And regularly, you will find a scenario where a planning permission is granted for X or Y, but actually land disputes prevent that application not being implementable. Planning absolutely needs to steer clear of this debate, and it is always possible for us to grant something that, because of landowner disputes on a number of issues, that may not actually be deliverable. So I'd ask members to keep that to one side and not place any material weight on it and come into a decision.
Thank you on that. My next question was, we heard about the previous tenant, a hairdresser, I believe it was said, was given notice in late 2019. Does the council have any more information on that we've taken into account in this matter? Because talk about the premises being vacant, I have slightly less sympathy, I think, if it was the landlord who made the sitting tenant of 9 years, leave. So I wonder if we have more information on that, please.
Yeah, there was no evidence of that provided as part of the application. The sole evidence that the applicant provided as part of the submission was that the previous tenant left because of financial hardship, but there was no evidence provided that they were evicted from the premises in terms of their tenancy.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you. Just coming at this from a slightly different angle, and forgive me because I am very new and I might have this completely wrong, but I'm hearing that clearly for Long Horsley as a village, commercial premises are few and far between and incredibly important. And in terms of the neighbourhood plan and future viability, especially given growth. So if the only commercially viable thing for the applicant to do is to move to residential rather than, upgrade, and I get that we still need to wait and see how much that's going to be and whether it is affordable or not affordable, is there not elsewhere that within our county policies, our development, our planning, that helps applicants within rural areas who want to retain essential commercial premises access funding to support them to do so, to make it then viable to let that out, given that it meets the needs of not just the landlord but of the whole community?
Yeah, thank you for that. Again, that's another good question. What we would do in certain circumstances, and this is talking about the wider county council, is look at a very clear business case justification for the use of funds on projects like this. Clearly here, there is no identified tenant. The application report also weaves in there the issue that the works have been designed in a way that would not permanently preclude its reversion to a residential unit, to a retail unit, should there be a strong demand develop. I would add, prior to the COVID pandemic, there was a fairly well publicised forecast in the property industry that between 30 and 70% of retail floor space across the UK will be lost as part of the realignment and move to digital and online shopping, etc. So with that in mind, I feel that there would have to be a compelling and very focused case for support on this. The alternative in some other communities are for perhaps for community-led enterprises, and the local authority could potentially look at help and assistance with those. But there would have to be a tabled actual proposal rather than just a speculative retention of a vacant shopping unit. Thanks.
Councillor Dodd.
Thank you. As someone who doesn't like to waste money, and someone who's done up a cottage that I had let out with a tenant that lasted 29 years, and then suddenly I had to do it, spend some money on it. I had to look up on this E-rating and work out, and you get professionals to come in and because when you let properties, it has to have a certain E rating, which includes windows, heating, everything. And it's not cheap. Now, if we're going to go on this one property and pay someone to come and tell us that the estimate is about right, surely there must be some on-the-shelf sort of age of property, or what I would call some evidence that says that that figure is in the bracket of what is expected to happen, rather than, let's face it, we're going to get more of these, as you've said, 70% of, or percentages of commercial will change. So I think that we, rather than waste money, I think we either look for an on-the-shelf product, or if we do this, it's used as an exemplar in the future. Thank you.
Chair, if I could come in there. Yes, I agree with you, Councillor Dodd, on that one. The problem we always face is when you're talking about historic buildings of any type, there's a very large element of the structural condition of the building itself often dictates the cost. And so you can use very much a generic... For a modern house, you can work out a generic costs for upgrading the energy efficiency are. Where we're in a situation where you've got an historic building that may require work for things like, as I said, structural issues as well as energy in itself. I would like to have access to information to say yes, in this case it is a robust argument. And I'll go back to the point I made before, is that we are establishing an approach here in advance of the new local plan coming out, where this issue can be looked at in more detail with a more modern policy. However, what this will do is to say that the decisions we make will require this information, so therefore we can ask applicants to supply this at the submission stage rather than trying to chase this. Yeah.
Councillor Towns.
Thank you, Chair. Just one final question from me on the Long Horsey Neighbourhood Plan Policy 8, about the marketing it for freehold or leasehold purposes for at least 6 months. We've heard that it was a bit of a catch-22 in that it couldn't be marketed without being up to scratch. I'm not entirely certain that that is right, because that would mean there would be literally millions of commercial properties that would just sit empty for years because nobody could do anything with them. It traps them. I'm fairly certain that you can market the property for sale for someone else to have a go at. Yeah. But of course, before they could let it on a new lease, they might then have to get the property up to scratch.
Yeah. Good point. We cannot compel someone to market it for sale if their desire is to keep this as in their ownership. The issue we've got here, and we keep going around the houses to this, and that I think it's clear that this, in itself, was the first time we've been presented with this argument, particularly framed in the context of the costs of viability are associated with bringing it up to the current energy efficiency standards. We had to take the step here of saying, is the evidence provided to us, is it reasonable to expect, to accept it? So, given this is a minor application and we wouldn't be following our normal procedures without a committee backing for this, we have to look at this information yet. On that basis, it is a catch-22. However, I'll keep back to the point. This is why sometimes it's useful to have a committee decision on these issues, because effectively what you are doing is I wouldn't say writing policy on the hoof, but you are clarifying the policy position of the authority on the hoof. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Dickinson.
Actually, I think I'll just save it for the debate, Chair, because it feels like we're going round in circles. I was going to ask the question about if we had all these concerns and we wanted all this independent advice and we needed to set a precedence with this application, then why is it here without all of that? And I don't accept the point that it's about committee back and Rob. It just doesn't fit.
Just to say to through the chair is when I recommend things to go to committee or not on the delegation reports, I do use the language sometimes of saying this is one where the committee's approach to this policy issue would be valuable, and we do it normally where an item comes to us for the first time. It is genuinely the first time we've come across this. However, though, we still have to look at the proportionate issue in terms of if we just said no straight away. There is a right of appeal here. On the face of it, this is in itself, this is a relatively minor application. But this is why it's come here, because it is an unusual one. It doesn't fit the normal pattern. Thank you.
Any other questions from members? No? Okay, do we have any motions from the floor, please? Councillor Sanderson.
Well, given that this goes against policy LNP 8 of the Long Horsley local plan, neighbourhood plan, and also goes against, as you can see in para 7.7, it goes against the NPF notes that the retention and development of accessible local services, community facilities such as local shops, meeting places, sports venues, should be supported where possible. I think that this, without all the evidence in front of us, I think we should reject this and refuse the application.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Do we have a seconder?
Good. I would like to second Councillor Sanderson's proposal, but I also think that Rob came out with a very good suggestion, and that means we will get the facts, and then we could possibly in 6 months go to Councillor Sanderson's
Could I just clarify something here? And lots of local authorities use this approach. You can defer. This is the first application. If we refuse it, the applicant gets a free go to resubmit, and in that period, it would be possible to do either the re-examination of the viability argument, either during a deferred period or during the free go exercise. Okay, so we can run it either way.
Can I just clarify, Chair? Obviously, Councillor Sanderson has proposed a motion to refuse as the application is not in accordance with LNP 8 and also the NPPF. Councillor Bennion has mentioned that he would be minded to second that, but also mentioned deferral. What we need is somebody to second this motion if we're to proceed with that. So somebody needs to make a decision. Either Councillor Bennion needs to decide whether he's going to second Councillor Sanderson's motion, or if nobody is to second it, that can't proceed and we need a new motion.
Well, could I see if this might help? Could I therefore take it back and say that I would actually like to defer this application for further work to be carried out, that it should come back to the committee, but not. But can we give a time limit so that we can do this advertising and so on that apparently hasn't happened?
Again, Chair, can I just clarify? Sorry, you'd like to defer the application for the viability assessment to be carried out independently?
That's correct. And I was just trying to find what might be an appropriate time, because there's no point in just giving it a month, you know.
Through the Chair, I think an appropriate way forward here is that we defer, and then I will update the chair on the progress. And if there is either delays or any dragging of feet by any party over this, we'll bring it back to committee for a straight refusal. Yeah, I'll work with the chair on that.
Thank you.
Chair, I'll be happy to second that.
Okay.
Right, okay, thank you. Councillor Towns, were you wanting to second or were you wanting to come in on the debate?
Well, we've now got a motion and a seconder. I was going to suggest that it's not just about getting the viability information. I think we need some clarity on whether or not this advertising has to take place for 6 months, because it's no good coming back to another meeting, and it's no good for the applicant coming back to another meeting for us to say, right, the viability point's proven, but you haven't advertised it for 6 months, now go off and do that. It's not fair to do that. That's why I think we need that addressed. I'd also like to know who owns the village green and whether or not they are going to grant it the rights that are needed, because if they say no, then I think that does become a relevant matter for planning, because it has an impossible access.
No, Chair, to be absolutely clear, it cannot be a material consideration. And legislatively, it's absolutely clear that we should not take into account ownership issues. Okay.
I'll take your advice on that. It sounds to me somewhat odd, but I'll take your advice on that. But I wonder if Councillor Sanderson and Councillor Bainan will amend their proposal, their motion, to add in the further information on the advertising period as well, and then we can kill two birds with one stone.
Councillor Sanderson?
I would like to do that, because I think that's an unproven matter still, and until it can be proven one way or another, it would be wrong to reconsider it, in my view.
And is that
Yeah,
seconded,
I'm happy
is
with that, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So the motion has been proposed, couldn't think of the word there, and seconded. Do we have anyone who wishes to start the debate? Councillor Bourne.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to support the motion as amended. I did have a concern with Councillor Sanderson's first motion, in that a simple refusal would mean a simple appeal, and it's very likely they will get it on appeal, because on a development of this size, they could probably argue to the inspector that they've done all they require on a viability, because indeed that's what the officers recommended. I think deferring it gives clarity to our, as Rob says, to the committee's views on our policies, and I think will be a useful benchmark for the future. And I think it's also fair to the applicant that, you know, they should be able to demonstrate what they're saying is true. And if they you know, they can prove that, well, obviously the committee might take a view. But that's why I fully support the deferral rather than the refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else like to add to the debate? No? Okay, just for clarity, because we have that motion read back out before we go to the vote, please.
Yes, it's to defer for independent viability assessment to be carried out by the council, well, for the council, and further information to be provided regarding the advertising of the premises. Is that correct?
Yeah. I'm just wondering, sorry, I don't mean to be difficult. I'm just wondering if we shouldn't just give this sufficient time to allow, for the sake of the applicant and for others, to allow this 6 months period to elapse, so that if we could we put a date on when this should come back to committee?
Chair, could I suggest a slight tweaking to the words that Mel has mentioned, and a clarification on the advertisement requirements? Because if we receive legal clarification in this scenario, it is not required, then clearly we can bring it back as soon as the viability work's done. If we receive legal clarification that actually there is an argument here for a minimum 6 month period, then we can look to agree that, yeah.
I suppose that's okay. I just would re-emphasise the fact that for a village like Long Horsley, closing away forever a commercial opportunity that would benefit local people is a very major thing to do. And I would want to be completely convinced that the advertising had been done in such a manner that it couldn't have been missed by the average person looking to rent commercial premises, if you see what I mean.
So
Okay,
can
again, I was going to say, can you clarify again, just so everybody's completely clear?
I've got
Thank you.
defer for independent viability assessment to be carried out, and for further information as to whether advertising for a period of 6 months is required under policy LPN 8. Is that correct? Rob, is that correct under LNP?
And you're happy that reflects your motion?
Yes, thank you.
And councillor Benny is
Yeah. Okay, that's great. So can we have a show of hands? All those in favour of councillor Sanderson's motion? Can you keep your hands up until we tell you otherwise, please? Thank you. Anyone against?
Against, Chair, just on the basis that there's no costs involved in terms of it's an open-ended chequebook.
So that's one. Any other? Do we have any abstentions? Okay, councillor Sanderson's motion is carried. Thank you. So moving on to item 7, which is the reserved matters application for appearance, scale, layout and landscaping for 2 dwellings on approved planning application for Greenfield House, Hepskett, Morpeth, Northumberland, and that planning reference is 20/03423/REM. Again, can I just check with members, did they receive the site visit videos? And they have seen them. Thank you very much. And over to Ryan, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just another update to members prior to the presentation. One further objection was received against the application from a neighbouring resident. Concerns were raised regarding loss of privacy, removal of trees, flooding, ecological impacts, and the undertaking of unlawful works on site without planning permission. Material planning considerations have been assessed within the officer report, and members must note that this application is for reserve matters approval only. The local planning authority are solely assessing these reserve matters, which consist of scale, appearance, layout and landscaping. Other matters have been previously considered under the initial outline application. So reserve matters approval is sought for the scale, appearance, layout and landscaping of 2 dwellings on land at Greenfield House, Hepskott. The local planning authority granted outline consent for up to 3 dwellings on the site last year. The applicant is seeking to retain the existing dwelling on site whilst constructing 2 new properties. The site is located within the settlement of Hepskott, to the south of Hepskott Burn, which runs through the village. It is bounded by residential properties to the north, south and west, with agricultural land to the east beyond the site boundary. This slide shows the proposed site layout. Plot 2 within the centre of the site is the existing dwelling, with plot 1 located towards the eastern boundary and plot 3 located towards the site frontage. The proposed elevations for plot 3 are shown on screen, demonstrating a 2-storey detached dwelling. Plot 1, located towards the rear boundary of the application site, is the larger of the 2 proposed dwellings, being a 2.5-storey detached property. Significant levels of glazing are proposed upon the rear elevation, allowing for views of agricultural land beyond the site boundary. These site photographs show the application site and the location of the existing access. Clearance works have been undertaken on site for the 2 plots. And this slide shows examples of existing properties within Hepskott, which is outlined within the officer report, is characterised by large detached properties with executive-style housing located towards the southern boundary of Hepskott, where the application site is located. There is significant variation to designs and material palettes of existing properties. The application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions outlined within the officer report and those attached to the extant outline consent for the site. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. So we now move on to public speaking, and we have 2 objectors to speak, Patricia Ann Culver and Sue Ashmore. Have you agreed a time between yourselves?
I understand, Chair, that Sue Ashmore is going first, followed by Patricia Ann Clover, and they're each going to have 2.5 minutes. Is that correct? So I'll stop after the 2.5 minutes. So you'll each have 2.5 minutes. Sue Ashmore will go first, and then Patricia Ann Clover.
If you press the,
When you're ready
There
to
we
start,
go.
press the
and that
button.
should be red. As soon as you start speaking, the timer will start for your 2.5 minutes. Thank you.
My concern is about the bats. I contacted my local councillor following a court case where Bellway was fined over £600,000 for destroying a breeding site or resting place of a European protected species. All bats in the UK are a protected species, and I contacted my local councillor to say I found a parallel with Greenfield House where the roof had been removed, destroying a maternal bat roost, 25 plus mature trees demolished, thus destroying habitat. This was on the 13th of December last year. The Director of Planning said he was aware of the Greenwich court case and was looking into it. The planner said enforcement procedures were currently underway. The 17th of May, the Director of Planning said he would get an update for me. On June the 8th this year, I asked the planners, has a Natural England European Protected Species Development Licence been obtained? Reply, this would need to be confirmed by Natural England as they would themselves that provide the licence to the applicant. Have 5 bat boxes been erected? No, not that I'm aware of. The applicant has not submitted this information to us in writing for discharge. I understand our enforcement team are monitoring the site. Were 3 inbuilt bat roost features included? These were all items specified as pre-commencement conditions within Condition 9, as above. Was bat-friendly timber treatment used on the new wooden fence alongside the river? And was a permit or exemption sought from the Environment Agency for work close to the river? Answer, I am unsure whether the timber treatment has been used upon this boundary fence. However, this fencing was not included within the recent planning approval. Therefore, it is likely the works will have been undertaken through permitted development rights afforded to the property. Does the lighting on the newly renovated house and the newly built garage and the other building adhere to external lighting recommended in accordance with BATS and lighting in the UK 2018? All these works were undertaken to an existing dwelling. They are not subject to the conditions attached to the outline.
Thank you very much. If we can now move to Patricia Ann Culver. Your 2.5 minutes will also start as soon as you start speaking. Thank you.
I am objecting as the immediate neighbour of Greenfield House. The 2 proposed houses are enormous, at 10 metres high, and they will dwarf the existing house. Will overlook our house and garden, and although there is plenty of leaf cover in the summer to screen our property, in the winter and spring we will be exposed to our neighbour's view. I am asking that the overall bulk of the houses is reduced to be similar to the existing houses, our own house Burnbrae and the original Greenfield house before the roof was raised. I am also asking that the south-facing windows of plot 3 be obscured with obscure glazing as recommended in condition 3 of the planning report for plot 1's balcony and east and west facing elevations, or that the building on plot 3 be rotated so that the windows face east-west instead of north-south. If the south-facing windows on plot 3 are not changed, we will lose our privacy and amenity as neighbours. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move on to the elected member for the division or parish town councillors. And we have Philip Ashmore, who understands from Hepskett Parish Council. Again, Philip, if you would like to start speaking, your time will start as soon as you speak. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I want to cover 2 main points. With the greatest respect, should we be hearing this application? Is it legally valid? And secondly, the issues of scale, overlooking, appearance, privacy and layout. So coming to, is this application legally valid? Was the associated outline application legally valid? We know that some legal issues, as we've heard, surround the issue of bats. The local planning authority has an overriding legal duty to protect bats. See Regina versus Cheshire East Borough Council. It's a criminal act to destroy a maternal bat roost, and the local planning authority's duty is to protect such roosts. The local planning authority were aware of the maternal bat roost in Greenfield House in October 2019, nearly 2 years ago. It formed part of the outline planning application. The bat roost was knowingly destroyed, a criminal act. Therefore, the local planning authority failed in its duty and its outline permission is valid. Is invalid. Secondly, on legalities, again with respect, please check the legality of both the outline and reserve matters application. In July 2020, outline permission was granted for the demolition of Greenfield House and the erection of 3 large houses. The reserve matters application seeks permission for the building of 2 houses, whilst the original house is retained and renovated. This makes a difference to the whole development, its mass, scale, access, flood risk, etc. The reserve matters application flows directly from the outline application and constantly refers to it. If it is not legally but it is not legally the same outline application that was granted. Moving on to, let me turn to the reserve matters. We object very strongly to the scale of the 2 proposed houses. They exceed 10 metres in height. They're 3 times the footprint of the existing Greenfield house. We've heard some of the comments about that. Plot 3 is only 8 metres from Burn Brae next door, giving serious overlooking privacy and amenity issues. Plot 1 overlooks Burn Brae's back garden, only 13 metres away. The appearance of the houses, they have windows everywhere. The south-facing aspect of plot 3 faces, as we've heard, Burn Brae. Only 8 metres away is a wall of glass and a line of windows 25 metres across. Thirdly, the layout is very squashed in because of the size of the houses. Plot 3 comes to within 2 metres of the main road, and the new houses are placed at the highest part of the site and will dominate the houses to the north. The Parish Council opposes this application for these above reasons. If it is permitted, it must be with the privacy issues properly addressed and a reduction in the scale and size of the 2 houses to the equivalent mass of the existing house, Greenfield House. We believe this would be acceptable to the neighbours surrounding the site. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final public speaker for today is Hannah Wafer. Again, as soon as you start speaking, the timer will start. Thank you.
Good afternoon, members. I will be representing the applicant and speaking in support of the application at Greenfield House. The proposed development seeks to provide 2 additional dwellings on site. The applicant seeks the LPA's approval on the reserve matters of the scheme. Outline permission was granted in 2020 and therefore the principle of residential development on site is considered acceptable and in accordance with relevant planning policy. The application before you seeks permission for the details such as design, scale and layout. Following discussions with the case officer, amendments were made to the scheme, following which the application is being recommended for approval. All technical matters such as ecology, drainage and highways have been addressed and subject to suitable conditions. There are no objections to the proposals before you from statutory consultees other than from the Parish Council. Hepscott is characterised by large detached properties with associated garden spaces. The proposed development reflects the general character of the area and the 2-storey dwellings were not considered to be out of keeping with their surroundings. The materials proposed are reflective of the surrounding area of Hepscott, and once constructed it is believed that the proposed properties will appear in keeping with the general appearance of the village. Should members approve the application, the site will provide high quality new housing within a sustainable location. It is understood that the parish council and local residents have concerns with regards to the scale and design of the proposed dwellings. The applicant wishes to note that following consultation with the case officer, the scale was reduced, and whilst the application will see an increase in development with the introduction of 2 new dwellings, it is considered that the site has been designed to ensure sufficient separation distances between the existing and proposed properties. It is also noted from the parish council's comments that there are concerns regarding works which have been carried out to the existing property Greenfield House. Whilst the works have been carried out without consent, the applicant is taking steps to rectify this, and they wish to note that the works to the roof were carried out following advice that the roof was rotting and dangerous. The works to Greenfield House are subject to a separate planning application and do not form part of the application before you. With regards to the baths which were located on site, it should be noted that the applicant did report themselves to the relevant authorities. The proposed development has been assessed by the planning officers, who have afforded appropriate weight to local and national planning policy and who have subsequently found the development to be acceptable subject to conditions. The local concerns of the development largely surround the scale of the dwellings and the potential impact on residential amenity. However, it is considered a balanced and reasoned judgment has been formed by the case officer, and as such the proposal is considered acceptable in terms of residential amenity. The applicant considers there are no sound planning reasons to refuse the application and respectfully requests members grant consent in accordance with the case officer recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of the public speakers. We now move on to questions from members, please.
Hi there. Can you just talk us a little bit through some of the privacy issues and in particular the treatment of the glazing, perhaps? Ryan, thank you. I think that was probably quite important.
Yeah, absolutely. So as part of our assessment, we of course assess sort of residential amenity and the impact on existing residents. Yeah, so in terms of sort of the application site itself, we've got the existing dwelling within the centre of the site. Plot 1 would be located towards the eastern boundary, and then plot 3 towards the western boundary. In terms of our assessment, the main sort of impacts we're looking at are the impact upon Bird Brae to the south of the site, the impact on Maple Lodge upon the adjacent side of the public highway, and the impacts to the sort of properties to the north beyond Hepscott Burn, although the separation distances to those properties are considerable in terms of privacy impact. In terms of the 2 dwellings, we've undertaken an assessment, and that the condition, we've recommended that a condition be attached that the first floor fenestration upon the side elevations of plot 3, which is the property towards the western boundary, be obscure glazed to protect the amenity of the neighbouring residents at the existing Greenfield House and Maple Lodge. In terms of plot 1, which is the larger dwelling towards sort of the rear of the site, we've recommended that obscure glazing being incorporated upon the proposed balcony to prevent any overlooking to the rear garden area of Burn Brae. So we feel that subject to those conditions being attached, there wouldn't be sort of any significant overlooking or privacy concerns to those properties.
Councillor Towns.
Thank you, Chair. I was just interested in what one of the speakers said about the legality of matters. I just would like some clarity from officers on that and whether that's been considered, please.
We've obviously looked at this issue. But Ryan, you're going to come in here and talk in detail, and I'll answer legal
absolutely, yeah. So the initial outline planning permission granted in 2020 gave consent for up to 3 dwellings on the site, which included the demolition of the existing property. As part of this reserve matters, the applicant has chosen to retain the existing dwelling on site and is now only constructing sort of 2 new dwellings. This is sort of standard procedure with outline applications where we can grant up to a certain number of dwellings on site, but a reserve matters can submit less than that if they choose.
Just to be clear, if the applicant come in to try and use reserve matters to increase the number of properties on the site, we would say that would have required a new application, a fresh whole application. Okay. So if we just clarify here, what we are actually looking at here is a scheme where permission, to be clear, was granted for 3 properties, on a large plot that has one plot on it, one building on it already. The applicants decided to keep that building and build 2 rather than clearing the site and building 3. Okay, so therefore the question is, and this is what the application report attempts to address, is that scale and massing and the details acceptable? And I would draw attention to the elements in the report that describe how we've looked at the overall, what we call the grain of development in the area. If you can see there are some of the other properties nearby to the west, where you see large properties on sites. Now, the development in this application falls within that level of grain. So 3 properties on there of the size suggested are accepted as a reasonable interpretation of the style of development in Hepscott. Okay.
Councillor Dodd.
Question on the bat issue. You know, there's a lot of accusations made there, saying that or someone's done something wrong. My understanding was that the bat legislation came out of Europe, where there is a severe bat problem, as in shortage of bats, but not so in the UK. Has any of that changed since we came out of Europe?
No. What we need to look at is that the bat legislation in this country is in force, it is relevant, and when you look at the report, you'll see that a bat survey is one of the attached approved documents to this, and our ecologist, who takes a very precautionary approach to this issue, has not objected to the scheme. However, the bat legislation is in force in this country, irrespective of European legislation, and it's not conditional on any changes to European legislation at the moment. Okay.
Councillor Bourne.
Thanks, Chair. Rob, just on that issue, obviously it's in the county ecologist has no issues, but it is noted in the report that there's a possible breach of the planning conditions in relation to outline approval. Now, how does that affect this decision legally, in the sense that, you know, if there's already been a breach of the previous permission, does that have any weight to this decision or not legally?
We are satisfied that the applicant has followed up on all the issues we've raised with them, and they have been involved with the regulator outside of the county council on this scheme, and this doesn't bring into question the validity of the outline. I could confirm that. Okay, but we are now satisfied with what's taken place since that this matter has been resolved satisfactorily, subject to these conditions. Okay.
Do we have any other questions, please? No? Okay, do we have a proposal? Councillor Wearmouth.
Thank you. Just in the interest of starting up some debate, I'll move the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that proposal? Councillor Dunn, thank you. Okay, and now we can open the debate. Anybody like to contribute to the debate? Councillor Dodd.
Yeah, people seem to be shy today. I think, you know, looking at this, it is a large site. There's been none of this sort of 20 metres or 30 metres or what's the difference or the distance between one house to the other that we often get. I remember Widrington, there was a site there that was very, very close to existing properties, but then some of the properties had been developed without permission to get to that point. And, you know, somebody's next door, I mean, we see this an awful lot in what I'd call my part of the world, which Darras Hall, where little houses or whatever are sacrificed for the bigger the plot. And this does look like a big plot So for me, I can't go against officer recommendation on this because it looks as if it's in line. There has been a previous application. There's been some accusations that it wasn't legal. Mr. Morpeth has explained that and the bat situation. So I'm happy that we proceed and I'm happy to support. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to contribute to the debate? Yep, Councillor Towns.
I'll just say something on it. I really agree with Councillor Dodd. For 4 years in a previous county councillor role, I represented Hepscott, so I know it reasonably well. I think these houses are out of scale. I think they're pretty gigantic. Yes, there are what I would class as large detached houses in the vicinity, but I think this takes it to a different level. In a personal view, but I have to take on board what the officers are telling me, because we just expose ourselves to risk of successful appeal and the costs awarded in that case. I do think they are too large. I have every sympathy with the neighbours. I'm somewhat more reassured because of the conditions that we're looking to impose about obscure glazing, but I think we've all experienced what happens there. A bit of sticky tape goes on the windows and 5 years later it's off and nothing happens about it. So we do need to make sure that we are keeping on top of those things. But again, I can't see anything that we can, policy-wise, that we can kind of cling on to say no to this. I would just say that I've mentioned before Medburn, and I've mentioned before Tranwell and Goobian Wood, and I think it is a shame when communities, this garden grab kind of activity continues and communities end up with these large houses that are out of reach to the vast majority of people in terms of affordability. And to my mind, they do somewhat spoil the character of an area, but if our hands are tied by national policy, I'm afraid our hands are tied by national policy.
Thank you. Would anybody else like, Councillor Bourne?
Thank you, Chair. I think I echo Councillor Towns's personal concerns. I was very concerned about the fact that one of the speakers did say there was only 8 metres between the dwellings, but that said, there are specific conditions in there for this obscure glazing to address that exact issue. I would just echo Councillor Towns's plea that these are properly enforced, and if they do become magically clear in the future, that the council will take it seriously and enforce it. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else like to add? Councillor Sanderson?
Yeah, I think it's been said. I think these are extremely large houses, and they will have an effect on neighbouring properties. And I very much hope that we will ensure that we enforce those measures that are contained in this report, and act if they are not. Thank you.
Anyone else? I don't see anyone indicating, so on that basis, we'll move to the vote. So the proposal that came forward was to accept the officer's recommendation for approval with the attached conditions as per the report. Okay, can we have a show of hands for the proposal, please? Thank you. Can we have a show of hands for those who are against, please? Okay. Abstentions? Okay, and that planning application has been approved. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 8 is the appeals update, which is there for information. Does anybody have anything they'd like to raise on that? No. Okay, and at this point I would like to hand over to our chair, Councillor Bainan, to continue the rest of the meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Foster. Right, good evening, afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Public questions Have we any...
Sorry, Councillor Binion, I think Leslie is just asking if we could have a 2-minute break just to allow people to leave, etc., just before you commence the
Certainly,
next part.
yeah. We will have a 2-minute... Seeing we're going straight through with this, we'll have a 2-minute recession.
I think there's also possibly some other officers who are due to attend.
Yeah. Right, once again, good afternoon, councillors and officers. Item number 9 on the agenda, public question time. Have we any questions from the members of the public?
No, Chair, we've received no written questions.
Thank you for that. Item number 10, petitions. Have we received any petitions or consider reports on petitions?
No, Chair, there's been no new petitions received and we'll have no updates on the other ones.
Thank you for that. Local service issues. I see we have 2 polls here, I think. You're a long way away. I'm trying to look to see who. Right. Gentlemen, which one of you would like to start?
If I could start first, I'm here on behalf of Martin King, who unfortunately can't make it today.
Great.
And I'd just like to so I cover both the technical services and the the highways area functions today. So just to give a quick...
Paul, could you switch your microphone on, please? Just press the...
Any button.
Any button, the red light will come on.
So just to highlight the key issues in the area. So I think first off, just to say that we are continuing to operate to our COVID safe working measures. Those are ongoing and continuing, and whilst we will be undertaking a further review of those as the up-to-date government easing information comes out, we don't expect any significant changes to those in the immediate future. Fundamentally, the community transmission levels are still high. We are conscious that we need to safeguard both the public and our own workforce, so things like the controls in the depots and within vehicles and those working methods that are there to protect staff whilst they're going about the duties will remain in place, so we can ensure the resilience of those services going forward. In terms of the reactive maintenance work, we are still catching up some of the backlog following the severe winter weather. We have put in place additional resources to support that activity, so there's an extra hot box and extra inspection staff that are undertaking works in and around the area. We expect to be back on top of that all by the end of September, and they've been making good progress keeping on top of that work. Similarly, in terms of gully maintenance and cleansing, that's work that's ongoing. There is some backlog still getting through on that, and there's some additional resources have been brought in to support that activity as well. In terms of capital works, the Morpeth area team has been expanded. We do have a significant capital programme in this area, so we have reflected that within the resourcing levels available to the team. And as part of that, but separate to that as well, is just to highlight that the former supervisor and manager Ali Johnston has been with us for a good while now, has now retired, so he's no longer with the council, and I'd just like to put on record the support and assistance that Ali gave over a long period of service for the county council, which was much appreciated, and we hope him all the best for the future. So in terms of the capital works, the micro-surfacing programme has started. They're on with the glebe in Stannington, and we'll be continuing to work on that. We expect that to be completed within the Castle Morpeth area by the end of the week, or end of July rather, weather permitting, so we'll be cracking on with that. The surface dressing schemes, the preparatory works have all been undertaken. There's a number of schemes completed, and we're in the Castle Morpeth area from pretty much July the 20th right through to early August to complete all of the schemes on the surface dressing, and again making good progress across the county on those and coming into this area to finish those schemes off now. In terms of the LTP works, we've undertaken and completed works at Grange Road in Widrington, the Boreham to Belsay, Stannington Station Road, that's on with this week, and we're coming back to complete the lining scheme as part of that once the road surface has settled down. We've also completed recently the traffic safety scheme and resurfacing along Stakeford Lane, which I believe has been welcomed from the community there, and that's a positive step forward. A number of schemes coming up. We've got Fox Culvert Lane in Ponteland area, Headon Burks and Rothley Crossroads between now and the next meeting. So again, we'll be progressing those schemes and moving forward. If there's any queries that anyone wants in terms of highway functions, obviously without Martin being here, I won't be able to answer the detailed operational aspects. But by all means, happy to take those and to raise them with the team and come back with a written response if need be. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Paul. Councillor Dodds.
Yeah, again, it's something for Martin. I'll sort of building this up. We've had on the A696 the Belsay School on an A road with a persistent traffic problem. I'm getting it from what I'd call new residents who obviously don't view the house when the traffic's flowing, but the complaints about not getting the 20-mile-per-hour limit in Belsay, as there is a school right on that road with awkward parking. There has been improvements in the school, but it's awkward. I wondered how far away are we on a 20-mile an hour? I've just driven the last few weeks up to the top of Scotland, and nearly all villages in Scotland are now at 20 mile an hour. It's annoying, but it's there for a purpose. and I just wondered where we are, because I'm getting an ear from someone about where we are with the Belsay one. And the second one is, I'm also picking up a lot of elderly people in Ponteland, mainly the Thornhill Road, around where there's a lot of old age accommodation, of elderly people falling on speed humps. I don't know if anyone else has picked that up, but that they're obviously walking on the road and not seeing the speed humps. And I know it's been in the system to have these speed humps sort of highlighted with, you know, paint, etc. But it doesn't seem to be happening. But what is happening is a lot of people are falling over. I seem to get them on a monthly basis. Normally the same person said they saw another person fall, but it's just one of those things. I don't know if other people get them, but speed humps, if they're not marked, and people walk around the road, they do find them obstructive. I know they're there for a purpose, because, you know, the alternative is to take the speed hump out. Well, that defeats the object.
So I'll need to come back to the detail of
I'll back it up with an email.
Questions, but in respect of the speed bump, that's the first time I've ever heard of pedestrians having issues with
it might be the
calming features. So I'll check that with the team and come back to you as well. Yeah.
Okay.
I've got Councillor Foster first and Councillor Dunn.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, just a point of clarification. It's not Stakeford Lane, it's actually the A1147. I'm clarifying because Stakeford Lane are crying out for the same kind of works to be carried out there. But I just want to say thank you very much for that scheme. It has actually received mixed reviews, but I think we can probably split the two lots of reviews from the residents who are plagued with the speeding vehicles, the associated noise, and it has been a very much welcome change for them. It has slowed the traffic down, there's no question about it, and the complaints are more from the people who are driving over them. And I think you would expect that. You're going to have that split regardless. But it's just to say again, thank you. It has made a difference to the lives of the people who live along that road, who are getting woken up 2 o'clock in the morning, sometimes from speeding vehicles. It has been part of a circuit, a speeding circuit. So we have broken that to a degree, and it'll be interesting to see how it has affected the other roads around that area. But also just to add to Councillor Dodd's comment, I'm pleased to say we haven't had any reports of any pedestrians being affected by them so far. But I don't know if it's maybe because these are new and the ones in your area perhaps older and maybe more worn or what, but definitely well received, so thank you very much.
Councillor Dunn.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just want to ask a question about, everybody keeps coming back to this 20-mile-an-hour limit and how it's in all the villages in Scotland. I just want to remind Paul that we in Linemouth had, or Ellington, had a petition in for a 20-mile-an-hour limit, which was refused by this council. So if that's the case, then we need to go back on that sort of thing. That petition was, what, 2 years ago? And we're still waiting for those designs to be implemented. So I would really like that to be hurried along, seeing as we had quite a serious accident just a fortnight ago on the same stretch of road again, where a car went through the barrier into those new houses on the Wayside Point estate. So residents are quite worried about the speed that vehicles are going along there. But certainly if the 20-mile-an-hour in all Scottish villages is something that we're thinking of here, then that would have to be sort of reconsidered for us.
Chair, come back on that.
Yep.
In terms of 20 mile an hour, there's a multi-year programme looking at schools, and that's still an ongoing programme. We expect to get through and to pretty much finish that towards the back end of this year, with possibly 1 or 2 schemes drifting into next. What I would say as part of that process, obviously people, and as part of the consultation, there's always the demands that come in for additional areas to be placed in as part of that, and that's something that we are really conscious of, that if you make it too large, you effectively dilute the benefit of that, because people then won't fundamentally take heed of that. So we do have to be firm in terms of trying to get the key outcomes of those schemes. and to hone down where the particular problems are and put in place appropriate solutions. Not aware of or familiar with the precise issue that you've raised. If there has been a petition previously that's been rejected, it will have been rejected on the grounds of speed surveys and all that evidential basis. But if there is still an ongoing issue there, we'll have to look at that and to look at that in terms of the prioritisation of the programme to see does it merit being included in the LTP. We are going to be receiving details out to your good selves imminently in terms of LTP schemes for the development of the programme in the coming year. So that with that the process we'd look to go through.
Sorry, I'll just come back to Paula. It has been included in the LTP. Right. What wasn't permitted was the 20 mile an hour. It's a 30 mile an hour design, but it's been ongoing for quite a few years now. So I'm wondering if there's any way we can hurry it up and actually start the works.
I'll let you know where it's at in the programme.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. Any other questions to Councillor Dodd?
Briefly, on the 20 mile an hour, I have seen these repeater signs where 20 mile, it's like school coming in, school going out times for an hour only, that it goes down, plenty signage, etc., down to 20 mile an hour, so that the road can continue its function, but it's also a safety thing. Have we ever looked at those? Thank you.
We have, and we have put in place those in at least one location within the county.
I ask if it was a success or disaster.
It seems to have been well received from what I can gather, but I can come back to you on the details of that in terms of the feedback on that particular scheme.
Thanks, Paul.
Richard, they're included in the scheme that we're doing.
Yes, Councillor.
I've just got a safety concern as well. I've had residents contact me regarding coming northbound on the A1. As you come off into Stannington, it says you come off at 70 miles per hour. But as you enter into Stannington, it's a one-way slip road. The speed issue there is quite serious. People are speeding through the Stannington, but the main safety concern is some people who are new to the area or visit the Ridley Arms in that area try to come back up that slip road and get onto and try and travel south down the northbound carriageway. It's been reported that there's been multiple vehicles trying to go up that slip road. They then see vehicles coming towards them and then do a U-turn on that slip road and come back to the village and don't know how to exit Stannington village. So how can we look at that as a safety concern? Can you give me some indication of what can be done to that as well? And not just signage, but can we monitor that situation? And I just have a second point as well. The Station Road in Stannington is due to be resurfaced, and that is going through a speed limit change. Can that speed limit change be hurried up so that we have the correct signage on the new road layout rather than having to come back to it at a later date, take up the existing speed limit and then put the new speed limit indicators in? Thank you.
Thank you. Where we can coordinate those works, we always do, but I would need to check to see where they're at with that, so I'll come back to you on that one for the speed limit. In terms of the particular issue you raise about the slip road, that's there effectively to provide a route in along the old, what we think primarily for the bus route coming off the A1. We have looked at that in terms of the signage, the road markings. All of that is as per DFT guidance. It's highly visible. We have undertaken some CCTV survey work there just to monitor to that, given some of the concerns that have been raised. And none of that identified any issues. So whilst we're aware of some of the concerns being raised, I think it is quite sporadic in terms of those. It is something that we are picking up with Highways England, though, because fundamentally it's a slip road off the trunk road, and it's their responsibility as part of that, but we have raised it with them as well as a concern locally.
Thank you for that. It has just been concerns from residents. I've not witnessed it myself, but I thought to bring it up because it is a vital safety concern if that was to happen, a car going the wrong way on the A1. Thank you for that.
Thanks for that, Councillor. Councillor Towns.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a neat segue, talking about coordinating things. I was very pleased to see that we've got quite a bit of work going on in my division in patching up the roads. Unfortunately, what we had in one location was the closure of the Morpeth Northern Bypass between Worrell Bank roundabout and the Robin of Pegswood roundabout at the fire station, at the same time as we had works going on the diversion route, which was through the old main road through Pegswood Village. I went to have a look myself, and there weren't huge queues of traffic at the time, admittedly, and the lights were changing fairly regularly, but I have had it in the neck from quite a lot of residents who thought that this was a case of very avoidable bad timing. All I've said to them was I would raise it today and just make the point, just pass that comment on. But I've also tried to maintain positivity and say, well, you know, work is getting done and it's getting done as quickly as possible, and that's a positive thing. But I did say I would pass on the frustration at the fact that the traffic was diverted through the village at the same time as there were works on that diversion. Thank you.
Paul, did you want to come back on that?
I think that's a fair comment. We'll look into that.
Yeah. Any other questions, please, for Paul? The first Paul. No. Thanks for that, Paul. Could we have the second Paul? Paul, could you introduce yourself just for the new members, please?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Hello, I'm Paul Laws. I'm the Area Manager for Neighbourhood Services at the Cookies Lane Depot. And that covers, neighbourhood services would cover waste services, grass cutting, street cleansing, cemeteries, and that sort of thing. In terms of the update, household waste collection services are continuing to perform well. The garden waste collections have been stretched several times this season already. That's due to new house build continuing to put pressure on the service. Plus, good growing conditions this season have stretched the service, as increased weight of bins increases the service time for those rounds. So far this season, we've had 670 new customers, and we're continuing to get renewals and new subscriptions coming in. In total, the Castle Morpeth area has got almost 7,000 customers at present on the garden waste service. As usual, the garden waste service will be reviewed at the end of the season to look for efficiencies and to make the service more manageable for next season. The glass trial is ongoing and performing well, with presentation rates continuing to be good. We've collected just short of 200 tonnes so far of glass. Also, part of the trial involved a 6-month questionnaire, which was sent out to all participants, and we received 639 responses to that. Of those who expressed views in the comments section, a significant majority were positive. Detailed results of the feedback and questionnaire will be included in the report due at the end of the trial. We are now on cut 8 for grass cutting in the area. Grass cutting proved to be a significant challenge to the teams in the early part of the season due to prolonged periods of rain throughout May, followed by very warm weather causing rapid growth. That also caused issues for the weed control. The weed control's been delivered in-house again this year. We are continuing to work through the area. We've got quite a lot done, but we're hoping to get it complete within the next week or so. If there's any areas of concern that members have, they can let me know and we'll get those looked at. We are also conducting a trial of alternatives to glyphosate this year in carefully chosen locations across the county. The alternatives that we're trialling are mechanical removal with a walk behind weed ripper brush, burning, hot foam, non-organic acid, perlagonic acid and acetic acid, and no mixed dual. Results will be analysed and a formal report will be produced at the end of the trial outlining the findings. In terms of some wider county-wide information, verge works started on schedule and are on target for completion by the end of July. This includes cutting 6.8 million square metres of verges across the county, which is cut with a mix of in-house resource and outside contractors. If there are any safety issues reported on visibility displays due to regrowth, then we will revisit these as a priority. So please let me know if there's any safety concerns that you have. NCC are responsible for safety testing of all memorials and cemeteries and enclosed churchyards where we are responsible for the maintenance. We've tested approximately 50,000 memorials in the county, and all memorials are now in scope, meaning that they have been safety tested. Efficiencies introduced in the process have allowed us to move from a 5-year retesting schedule to a 4-year cycle to make our burial grounds a safer place to visit. And that's all from me.
Thanks for that, Paul. Paul, could you switch up? I don't know if you've got your microphone on.
I have, yes.
Yeah, I couldn't hear you coming through mine. One quick question from myself. The glass collecting.
Yep.
Was it a year's trial it was going to be? Just when did it start and when will the trial finish?
I think it's due to finish very soon. It was for a year, and I think we've done 10 collections, if I remember rightly. So it's due to finish quite soon.
So when it finishes, or the month before, will you come back to this committee and give a report on it?
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I come in
Paul
there,
John,
Chair?
yeah. Thanks, Glenn.
It's a county-wide trial, so the intention is that there's a paper going to be coming through to both the scrutiny committee and to Cabinet with the outcomes of that.
Excellent.
The intention as part of that will be, we will be looking to try and continue with the pilot areas, because we don't want to remove the service from those areas where that's obviously clearly well received and working. So we're looking at the funding impacts of that, with a view to obviously trying to expand the scheme and looking at the timetable for expansion. That timetable for expansion fundamentally will be linked to the government and changes in national waste policy and funding that we expect to be coming out within the next 12 to 18 months that'll help basically prevent the cost being borne by local taxpayers for those improvements to the service.
Thanks, Paul. Councillor Towns.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of comments. First off, Paul, thank you for all your help you've given me over the last period, since I said thank you for the last time. I know it's obviously a very busy time of year for you and your team, with the kind of the weeds and the grass growing at this particular time of year, and you've been very helpful with me in explaining the rationale of our weed maintenance or weed destruction policy, how we want to describe it. But I just want to say I was at an event on Saturday in Pegswood, hosted by Pegswood Parish Council, where they presented some plans for deliberately grown wildflower areas, which obviously take some maintenance, but the idea is that these areas will require less maintenance and less overall cost to maintain, while also having added environmental benefits for carbon sequestration and also insect habitat, because obviously I think we're all acutely aware of the decline in insect populations and the problems that can cause for farming and other industries. So I was just wondering if there were any plans in the county for a larger scale trialling of wildflower areas, and if we could offer some help and guidance to parish councils like Pegswood who would like to take forward their own projects in that regard.
I'm not aware of any large-scale trials that are planned, but I have been contacted by a representative of Climate Action Northumberland. I may have gotten that wrong, but it's something along those lines, on putting trials in certain areas, and I'm waiting for some availability with that lady to be able to meet up to discuss some pilot areas where we could put, she didn't term them wildflowers, they were native meadow flower mixes. And you're quite right in saying that wildflower meadows they take a lot of maintenance. It takes a lot of work to get them put in, and then they need to be maintained year on year. I'm hoping that working with the likes of Climate Action Northumberland, we can come up with some ideas of native mixes that can go in that'll sort of look after themselves or take less maintenance. Hopefully will help the local biodiversity that's native to the area as well. So that there is things going on, and obviously we have areas like Dusha Park where there's the banks that aren't maintained, there's the backside that isn't maintained, and it is allowed to grow. So and I'm more than willing to speak to any town or parish or indeed councillor that wants to get involved in anything like that and try things in their area.
Thanks
Sorry,
for that.
through you, Chair. if I
Yes,
may. Thank you for that, Paul. What I'll do is I'll try and just put you in touch with Pegwood Parish Council on that, because I think they'd be very interested in hosting a trial.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Paul. Councillor Dunn.
Thank you. One of the villages in my ward has just recently employed a part-time litter picker just to help ease things within the village. Now, he's only been in the job a week, and he's provided the parish with a map detailing every blocked drain in the village and every place where there's weeds. So I will be able to send that to you, Paul, just to keep you up to date. The thing is, I know that the team do come out, and the gully wagon does come out and it does do things within this village, but it doesn't seem to have any effect. You can come out and keep coming out, but it doesn't rectify the problem. So what would you suggest moving that forward? Because it needs something done that's going to have a long-lasting effect on it. I don't know whether that would be you or Martin, to be honest.
It is a highways function, and I think we recognise that some of the areas within the county, we do have a differential in terms of how often we go to certain gullies, because just the nature and the location, some suffer more from detritus washout from adjoining fields and banks and things such as that. But there are clearly parts of the county as well where the drainage systems are very old, they're outdated, and that's part of the highway improvement works as well. But that's a very significant undertaking on a county the size of Northumberland, so we do prioritise that work. What we are in process of doing is we have got several new gully tankers on order through the fleet replacement programme as well, that are larger vehicles that have greater capacity. So we expect to get greater productivity out of those in terms of, you know, not having to do as much marching and being able to do a bit more fighting in terms of the capacity of those as well. So we are going through that process of revisiting and reprioritising the gully emptying arrangements as well, to highlight those that need more frequent cycle of intervention as part of that process. So if there's particular ones that you're having problems with, by all means, put them forward. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Paul. Are there any other questions for the two Pauls? Can't see any. Gentlemen, could you pass on our thanks to all the workforce for the work they've done over the COVID period? I've had nothing but praise for all the guys out on the front line. And Paul, can you pass on our thanks to Ali, and hope he enjoys his retirement. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Right, gentlemen, councillors. Appointments to outside bodies, page 57, 58 in your bundle. You will see you have a list of outside bodies, and we are looking for councillors to propose themselves for these.
Excuse me, Chair.
I can switch your microphone off, Councillor Wearmouth. Chopping. Sorry.
Sorry, could I ask a question just before we proceed to that item? Can I ask why Choppington Welfare isn't on that list? Because it was my understanding that the county councillor for Choppington would normally be co-opted onto that committee, so I was expecting to see it there, but it's not on the list.
I don't know that, and I'm looking down to see if anybody else.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. This is just the list that we were given. I will check that out, though. Let you know. Councillor Foster.
Chair, that one was removed in the past. Councillor Ledger, I believe, was involved. Yeah. It's a difficult one, but I do know that Councillor Murphy does have an interest in trying to open up that welfare to the residents, as there are some issues in that area. So I would say if we can get that back on board, then it's something that we should look at, and I know Councillor Murphy would very much like to be part of that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Foster. Councillor Murphy, can you leave that with me and I can talk to officers, see if we get that? Right, let's go to the first one, Chopping Education Foundation. There doesn't seem to be many people who are...
Well, would the local member be interested?
Well, that's...
Sorry, would the local member be interested in that? I'm sure she would. She did a really good job.
Apologies, I really didn't know I was supposed to jump up and say, yay, I'd love to do it. But absolutely, yes, I would love to do it.
Do we all agree with that?
Agreed.
Jewish Bay Partnership, I suspect Scott would want to do that. He's not here, so we'll put Councillor Great. Friends of Morpeth Museum, Councillor Wearmouth. Or Councillor Bourne. Good, well done. Agreed. Greater Morpeth Development Trust, Councillor Wearmouth, I'm sure that's in your portfolio.
I already occupy that position as of the last 4 years, happy to continue.
That's excellent. Everybody agree with that? Great. Linton Village Hall Management Committee. And you want to continue on that one, Liz? Agreed. Agreed. Stake Forward, Boomersons. There's two places there.
Chair, I've been on that welfare since pretty much 2008 when I first became councillor, and Councillor Ledger was also on there, so I would say if she's interested, Councillor Murphy would be an ideal addition to that
Agreed.
one. Thank
Agreed.
you.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
Chair, can I just come in there as well?
Certainly.
You might want to give me some steer on this, but Netherton Park Residents Association, I don't know if that should be on this list as well.
Chair, I think that was done by full council.
Right, so that's...
Right.
Just want to confirm that.
For some, like, your appointment at Kelly Foundation, they're just not up for renewal either.
Right.
They're on the list. They're not annual or appointments, or they don't coincide with 4-year term.
Yep. Thank you for that. We'll have hurry through because our glorious leader is obviously wanting to get away.
He's obviously got some hay to make.
Members, local improvement schemes, that is just for information only. Local area council work programme, you have that at the back of the agenda. Again, on those with the big new council, at the chairs and vice chairs briefing meeting, we are looking for ideas, so please approach me or Julie for any, or Councillor Towns, if you have any ideas for the upcoming work programme. Any at all, please just contact me. Urgent business, I don't have any. I'm looking down, no urgent business. So we will close the meeting. Thank you all very much, councillors.